The air was humid, and the rain continued to fall, soaking the once parched earth. It had been a while since it had rained like this, unusual for summer weather, but you were enjoying it until now. You had been walking home when you stopped at a nearby field by the roadside to take in the scenery. The grass was tall, almost tall enough to stand in and be completely hidden by the waving stalks. It obviously hadn't been tended to in some time and gave off an eerie feeling. Staring at it was like looking into a dark alleyway at night. As hard as you may try, you have no idea if anything is looking back. While standing there, you notice that the rain has begun falling at an intensity that gave you cause for concern. Staying much longer gawking at grass would leave you drenched and more than a little irritated, to say the least. Home is still a few miles away, and there's no chance you'd make it before getting drenched. Looking around, you notice a small shed-like building jutting above the grass deeper into the field. Not giving it a second thought, you rush down the remnants of a trail cutting through the grass, leading up to the building. Getting to the shed, you find its door to be, well, non-existent. It appears that what remains of the door's hinges are rusted with torn clumps of brown and orange metal bending outwards. Shrugging it off, you steal yourself away inside, putting your back to the contents of the shed whilst peering back out of your entrance. The rain, now roaring outside, causes you to retreat further into the shed. Upon doing so, it comes to your attention just how far back this shed really goes. You turn around to see shelves lined with what you'd expect to find in such a place. Gardening tools, old bags of manure, and various other inconspicuous knickknacks. And then something not quite as common, a set of stone stairs covered in what appears to be a viscous sludge leading underground into a darkness only slightly penetrated by the light coming from the doorway. For a while you ponder what could cause such a gross sight, as the ceiling is intact and the steps too far away from the entrance for it to be caused by rainwater. You smirk as it comes to mind the numerous horror movies and stereotypical scenarios in which the protagonist is faced with a similar situation, choosing to investigate only to be stabbed by a rogue psychopath or devoured by an unspeakable evil. Not wanting to tempt fate, you keep your distance, now a little more willing to risk getting splashed by the now dying rain. After a few minutes of switching your gaze back and forth from the stairs to the doorway, the rain finally finishes its assault, and you get ready to head home, where your bed awaits your arrival. Turning to face the exit, you go to step through the doorway, only to have your leg firmly yanked and head plummeting towards the ground. An intense pain shoots through your head, making your world spin. It's amazing you're still conscious, though after opening your eyes, you wish you weren't, as you are greeted with the impossible. A face as dark as the shadows, with no obvious features except a pair of stalks jutting out from either side. A long tendril comes from what you can only assume is its mouth. The tendril appears to be retreating back into its cavernous maw. It is then you realize why this exists in the first place. You hadn't noticed the intense pain before now, but the tendril is piercing through your leg with its sharp, barbed tip, reeling you in towards its master. You kick, scream, and claw at your ankle to no avail. As your legs, torso, and arms become numb and are slowly enveloped into this hellish creature, you let out one final scream that is quickly muffled and silenced permanently. Steam rising from the winding, labyrinthine concrete streets of New York City in the winter. The sky is deep, black, and endless, lined with the cold fire of dying stars. And there are a million other places Levi would rather be. Walking home from a late shift at a shitty job, hands jammed in his coat pockets, he craves a cigarette he can't afford to buy. His stomach grumbles in protest from a freezer-burnt TV dinner at lunch. He hasn't eaten since then. Yeah, he was angry and miserable with his life and wished he was someone else who lived 1,000 miles away. But he was Levi Reed of New York City, he who spent years of his life in college only to discover he was not able to find a job in the field he studied. He just resigned to working a minimum wage job with terrible hours. He wanted out. He just didn't know how to go about doing it. Levi mulled over this as he trudged through the park at night. Hobos lay on benches in freezing weather, with haunted eyes following him silently as he walked past. He did not avert his gaze. A few moments later and further down the path, he glanced up, feeling uneasy. The street lamps up ahead would flicker for several seconds before dying out entirely. This continued one by one until the lamp nearest to him went out. This was accompanied by the distant thump of hooves beating against pavement. Confused, Levi came to a halt. He strained to listen, not entirely convinced the sound was real and not just a product of his own mind. The nearer the hooves beating drew, the more the rest of the world seemed to fade out and away, as if somebody was turning a dial. His own heartbeat, thudding in his ears, seemed to sync with the outside source, and then an eerie silence. Over the crest of the hill came a horse and a rider. It was a great, powerful stallion with rippling muscles and a coat of fur as white as death, eyes burning with all the cold fury of hell. Atop its back was a constantly shifting enigma, a large blur. Levi could not comprehend those morphing colors, the likes of which he had never seen. And then it spoke.
"Do you wish to die?"
The rider did not speak English, but somehow Levi understood its garbled tongue. He found he could not speak in its presence.
"I said, do you wish to die?"
Levi could not think clearly. His mind ran screaming in 1,000 different directions, threatening to break apart entirely. All he could manage was, "Who are you?" The rider's steed snorted, steam billowing from its flared nostrils. It pawed the ground impatiently with one enormous hoof. The rider's ever-changing features seemed to settle, somewhat, into that of a broad, vaguely humanoid shape. Its eyes remained blurry, rapidly shifting, looking straight through him to his soul.
"Ask not who I am, but what?"
Without warning, the rider reached out and placed its hand to Levi's forehead. From its fingertips and into his brain flowed eternity. Chaos, destruction, life, death, rebirth, kings and men, the secrets of the universe. Everything. Levi dropped to his knees, wailing in agony. The rider observed him quietly, watching with indifference as Levi doubled over. His whole body trembled and shook as he collapsed, heaving once. Blood splurted from his mouth, staining snow the color of brilliant crimson beneath him. For a long moment, he was still. At the sound of the rider's voice, his eyes rolled in that direction, and he remained silent but willing. A soldier standing attention to his commander.
"Go forth, mortal, and tell your fellow man this world will end in 49 days.
Levi's eyes rolled in his skull, replaying the terrible secrets he had seen again and again and again. Having been a witness to those horrors, he found he was no longer quite the same, no longer quite human. The rider lifted the reins of the stallion, snapping them once. Those cold hellfire's eyes never leaving Levi's own.
For I am death, and you shall follow me.
In a blaze of flashing white, the rider and the horse were gone. Levi lay there for what felt like a very long time, hearing those words, and those words only. Then he slowly rose to his feet among the blossom of red in the frost and snow. The sharp breath of winter brushed past, but he didn't mind. There were greater concerns to be had now. The world was going to end. Levi was the messenger. I've had insomnia since I was little, so it was not unusual for me to not get a good night's rest. There are other reasons to this, mostly anxiety and my few phobias and other complicated things. You see, I have necrophobia, fear of death, arachnophobia, fear of spiders. However, I fear big ones, coulrophobia, fear of clowns, and demon phobia, fear of demons. Almost every night I toss and turn trying to sleep, but my mind races with many thoughts such as Jeff the Killer coming through my window and telling me to go to bed. And in my restless state, he waits no longer and kills me, even though I don't believe in his existence. Sometimes it's the thought of giant spiders crawling on my bed, or I wake up to an evil clown staring at me, or even worse, the demon that haunts me when I go to sleep. A few nights ago, while tossing and turning, I heard a sort of tearing sound, like tearing paper or a sharp inhale. I brushed it off because I have 2 dogs who wander in my room from time to time, tearing up the paper on my floor. I said, "Lana, Dewey, do you want to lie in bed with me?" I patted my bedside to get Lana or Dewey to come closer, but I was only met with the tearing. I grabbed my body pillow and buried my face in it, trying to fall asleep. But I just ended up getting frustrated with each passing moment. All I heard was a low hum of my fucking air conditioner and the tearing sound. When I finally began to drift off, it didn't even feel like the usual heavy sleep. It felt light. Like if a floorboard were to make the slightest creak, it would snap me back to reality. I couldn't shake the feeling I was not alone, but I didn't even dare to open my eyes and see if the feeling was true. I kept telling myself, "You need to sleep. Another night of unrest will only make the day more unbearable. Go to sleep. There is nothing here. You're only imagining it. Go to sleep." It took what felt like hours for me to finally fall into a deep slumber. I can't remember much of the dream I had that night, only that it was unusual. The fragments I do remember, however, pieced together into a sort of dream within a dream. The dream started with me just sitting on my bed and my dogs lying next to me. Someone walked in and sat down on the other side of the bed, their back facing me. I asked them if they were okay, but they just lay down and curled into a fetal position. I looked at them for a while and fell asleep soon after. The next part I remember is that I was sitting in a tree, and the same person who was on my bed sat on a branch above me. We were having an involved conversation on a topic I can't recall, nor can I recall what the person looked like. We were high above the ground, and I couldn't help but look down and try to see every small detail my hawk eyes could find. The branch I was sitting on broke, and the ground below disappeared. I grabbed a vine and started swinging, the other person nowhere in sight. No. In the next fragment, I was standing in an almost empty meadow. Only a few trees dotted the landscape and the sky was dark. I heard someone yell my name. Looking around, I caught a few glimpses of what must have been gruesome and gory images. I don't remember what they looked like, but I remember feeling my stomach churn and the smell of death fill my nose and the sound of gagging. I fell to my hands and knees, breathing heavily. When the urge to vomit subsided, I stood up and saw the same person running towards me with a gleeful smile on their face, yelling my name. Then I felt dizzy, and all I saw was white. The final fragment, which leaves me with many questions, started with me and the other person walking into a repair garage kind of place. Just a few steps in, I collapsed. It was kind of as if I died. There was a flash of lightning and a person was cradling my limp body in their arms, begging me not to be dead, and sobbing, almost wailing, like a mother would do when she hears of her child's death. Another flash and the shadow of a person softly swinging from a noose, and another fucking shadow. It was about the height of a young child. Its hair looked frizzy and tangled. It was holding a knife above its head, and I remember the laugh. I'd heard it before. That fucking laugh that torments me to no end. The laugh of that demonic fuck. As if the laugh was not enough, it started chanting its usual chant, in the same maniacal, shaky, chuckling tone. It was almost singing it. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna cut your lips and tongue off with this knife. The knife of many forge metals and infused with mercury. I think I might slit your throat too, so if you don't bleed out, or if the blade doesn't kill, then the poison will. You'd better run. You'd better try to hide. 'Cause I'll stab you in the sides. Maybe while you think of that, I might as well stab you in the back. But you can't run, and you can't hide because I will find you with my aura sight. I woke up. My sheets were slightly stuck to my skin, soaked in sweat and tears. I was breathing like I had held my breath until I was close to passing out. I looked around the darkness in my room and lay back down, softly sobbing, so I wouldn't wake my brother, who could not care less about what just happened and would just yell at me. I was at my wit's end. I felt like if this continued, it might kill me. The fear, the anxiety, the sleep deprivation, the loneliness. Even as I type this, I feel tears welling in my eyes and a feeling that my heart wants to stop.